Go ahead.
Hi, this is Holly Duckworth, PhD, and I'm on my superior self.
Dr. Duckworth, thank you for taking the time. I've been looking forward to this interview for all week, essentially, since we spoke before. Read your book, couldn't put it down. I can't thank you enough for your work. Your book is titled Finding Purpose. I love the cover, fascinating artwork. I love the content, Finding Purpose. And I absolutely love the introduction that you put in the book referring to Viktor Frankl and his
Yeah,
work with
yeah,
logotherapy.
yeah,
Um, why did you, what connected you with his work and why did you put it in the intro?
yeah, sure. Thank you for having me, Trey. I'm looking forward to tonight. So, Viktor Frankl is actually required reading when you get your PhD in psychology. So that's how I got introduced to Viktor Frankl. Unfortunately, I had never read his work, Man's Search for Meaning, before then. And for those that don't know it, Viktor Frankl he was in 4 different concentration camps as a Jew in Nazi Austria at the time. And he was a psychologist. Actually, back then, he was a psychiatrist, but psychiatrists were just MDs, right? There wasn't a specialty of psychiatry. He was just an MD, but his specialty was psychiatry. And once he got taken into the first concentration camp, he decided to approach his situation as a psychiatrist, and he started studying the people around him in the concentration camps. And what he really did, and what he writes about, and the point of logotherapy is even in the most gruesome, awful, and in his book, he goes into it in like serious, raw detail, what he went through in the concentration camps. But even in that situation, he found purpose. He
Mm,
found a purpose for being. And his purpose was studying the psychology of the interned people around him. And he believes that him giving himself that purpose is what saved his life because
mm,
he saw all these people around him giving up a life purpose and then like dying terrible deaths. And so it was really for me in my book, Finding Purpose, Surprising Wisdom from the Higher Self. For me, what I learned from Viktor Frankl was, well, if he can find purpose in the middle of a Nazi concentration camp, we can all find purpose in our life.
sure. And I think that resonates with me so much right now because I feel like not only in my life, I struggle with finding that purpose. I find it in the podcast and in my work, my personal work, spirituality, but also I see it in society as well. Like we're all going through this transition. You want to call it vibration or whatever you want to call that. I see it. People are searching for their purpose and they're having a tough time because a lot of the old paradigm is falling away
Mhm.
and they don't know where to go. Like they don't
Right,
know what to do. They're not used to it.
right, right.
And you talk a
Well,
little bit
and
about that in your book too.
yeah, well, and also too, I think people now. I mean, um, I'm of the Gen X generation, and so I'm kind of a weird generation. Not really millennial, not really boomer, but for a lot of people, their parents or grandparents were of the boomer generation, and looking at their entire life and their lifestyle that we're leaving now, yay, um, it was pretty meaningless.
Mm,
Go to work for 40 years, draw a pension, average lifespan 65, 68. So at best, you've got 6 or 7 years of quote unquote freedom, from the corporate grind. Get married, have kids, and every day is just rinse, repeat, rinse, repeat. And I think that a lot of we call it ascension, expansion, all of the wonderful things that are happening on the face of the earth now are people rejecting that meaninglessness
Hmm.
and frankly demanding purpose in their life. And I think that's fabulous.
Demanding purpose. Yeah.
Yeah.
There's a quote from Viktor Frankl. We had to teach the despairing men that it did not really matter what we expected from life, but rather what life expected from us.
Mhm.
What does that mean to you?
That's his service. And that's, in the book, I found basically four themes of life purpose. And his was a purpose of service, of being in service. That's what life expected of him, was him being of service to others. And how I came up with these four themes, Trey, is I had done, I was many years into my QHHT profession, and I was shocked by how similar the questions were, client to client to client. And then I was even more shocked of how similar the answers to those similar questions were. And one of those very similar questions everybody asks in their QHHT session is, what is my life purpose? And I kept getting the same answer. And these people don't know each other from Adam. And this goes
Mhm.
on for years. And I'm getting the same answers. And so I did a bunch of analysis, qualitative research analysis to conclude that there were really only four themes to life purpose. And one of them is service, which is what Viktor Frankl's talking about. One is life purpose as experience. So it's in the experience. And I've got a train coming by. I'm so sorry.
It's okay.
Um, and so experience, service, a life purpose to be and bring love into this dimension, and then a life purpose to be, simply to be. And so of all, I'm talking over 400 clients, and I conclude these four themes in almost, not completely, but almost everyone's answer can be drawn to one of these four themes of life purpose.
Hmm. I love that. So QHHT, right? Like, so
Mhm.
those that aren't familiar with that, that's a modality that Dolores Cannon created, her life's work.
Mhm.
You are a practitioner underneath that umbrella, um, but you weren't always into the woohoo side of things, right? Like you were definitely
Yeah.
left brain analytical. Graduated from University of Tennessee,
Mhm.
UT, Go
Go Vols.
Vols. I have a signed autograph hat from Peyton Manning back when he played.
Wow. Okay,
One of my
cool.
buddies graduated from UT. I loved it. Went there twice. Saw Fresno State, and I can't remember the other game, but I love UT.
Mhm.
Graduated mechanical engineer. Went back to graduate school at USC.
Mhm.
Got your master's and then PhD from Strayer University,
Capella.
psychology. Capella,
Capella University.
Capella
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
University,
yeah.
psychology.
Mhm.
Um, very much in the corporate world, doing your thing, wearing the power suits, strutting your stuff. What drew you to hypnosis?
Yeah, so all of that. It's total, like, engineering, operations management, quality management. And then after I studied psychology, into organizational development, um, executive consulting, leadership development, that kind of thing. So still, even in the corporate world with my psychology. And then my son, who at the time was 20, got arrested for DUI. And I was I was a nervous wreck. I was distraught. I was pulling my hair, literally pulling my hair out, pacing the floor. And he was in a really, really terrible situation. That we were in Phoenix at the time. And so this was Sheriff Joe in Tent City. And he was going to be in for 21 days. And they literally just put tents in the desert. It's 120 degrees. And the incarcerated people are in that mess. And I couldn't visit him. I couldn't even do like a Skype call or anything like that. And I had rare phone calls with him. And in one of those phone calls, he says, "Hey, mom, I found a book I think you'd like." And I'm like, "Okay." And he in jail, he found Dolores Cannon, Convoluted Universe, Book 4. And I later found out that Dolores had an entire prison outreach to her publishing company. She was sending thousands of books to prisons all over the country.
I was going to
And
say, what's the probability, since you're a researcher, what's the
yeah,
probability of her book being in his like
right,
jail or whatever, like,
right, right. And so, so I'm, Amazon, click, click, get the book. I had never heard of her, never would have heard of her. And I start reading Convo 4 and everything I've ever believed in my entire life. And there it is in print. And I'd never seen it in print before. So things like, things like source energy instead of God, this concept that God is really the fabric of the universe and the source, not some dude in sandals on a cloud. Um, things like, energetic beings, formless beings, um, all kinds of metaphysical information in that book. I kind of refer now to Convoluted Universe. There's 5 of those books of Dolores Cannon's, and I kind of refer to series of 5 as an encyclopedia of metaphysics. If you want to know everything about metaphysics, read all 5 of those books. But so anyway, I'm just dumbfounded. I love the book. By the time he got out, I had read 5 of her books. I was just devouring them as fast as I could. And then that was in December. In January, she was going to be speaking. She would have these 3-day retreat seminar things. And at these retreats, she would put 200 people into hypnosis simultaneously. I mean, she was just ridiculously powerful in that way. And of course, I'm going in left brained engineer, right, Trey? And I'm like,
mhm.
okay, I totally love her research. I'm into her books. I'm just a devotee by this time. But I'm honestly, as I'm walking into this seminar, so my son and I went as kind of healing, and I'm just like, let's go be in the room with her. And but I'm honestly, as I'm walking into that room after I've paid the ticket and flown, to Sacramento and gotten in there, I'm still thinking, yeah, this isn't going to work on me. It works on those people, not me, right? And of course, she starts the first hypnosis script, and I'm out. I'm having this profound experience, off the hook. Knew it was not my imagination. And like I'm gonna at the end of it, after we wake up, like I'm gonna run to Dolores up to the stage and go, "Hey, did you know this works? This really works." After she's been doing it for 35 years at that point.
When was your first conversation with her?
At that
That
seminar, this
retreat?
is the first time I saw her, first time I knew her. Julia was there, her daughter, who's carrying on her work now. Dolores passed in 2014, but it was then, and it was honestly powerful just being in the room with her.
Hmm.
So I quickly I quickly became, okay, we'll call it a groupie, not a stalker. And I would literally go to every single solitary appearance this woman had. And so, I went to UFO conferences and transformation conferences, and I would just find it wherever Dolores was, that was where I was going to be. And I had already started my training with her by then as well. That first seminar was in January. I was in training by February, but then I was also stalking her outside of class. And I mean, like everywhere she went, she was so powerful. It was
Hmm.
ridiculous. And she was in her 80s by then.
Wow.
Yeah.
When she passed away in 2014, how old was she?
I think she was 86, 85 or
86,
86. Yeah.
19
Mhm.
books. I mean,
Mhm.
how many seminars? She's got
Mhm.
like what, an 8 year at that time, an 8 year waiting list.
Waiting list. And she only took terminally ill clients. So, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
I What
Yeah.
attracted you to her? Like, what was it? Was it the sacred knowledge, or was it like this truth, right? Like this, did you resonate with that truth? Like, what was it?
It resonated. My left brain resonated with her left brain. I mean, she was just,
Well, talk
you
about that,
know,
right? So people think about hypnosis being this like weird, far out thing, right? Left brain is
Mhm.
very analytical. So what
Mhm.
was it
Yes.
about? How do you associate the left brain with her method?
Yeah. So she was no nonsense. She, like all of her early books. So here's a great example. One of her earliest books was Jesus and the Essenes, and they walked with Jesus. And she found her early books were all about history. And she did books with Nostradamus. She did books on what else did she do historically? Oh, Hiroshima, and anywhere she could find people that had a past life experience that could be historically validated, she was all about it. So, Jesus in the Essenes, she had a client that regressed as the rabbi that gave Jesus and John their bar mitzvah. And
Goodness.
she worked with this one client for a few years to write the two books. And but in Jesus in the Essenes, so she wouldn't just take the hypnosis information. She would take the hypnosis information and then she would validate it through archaeological records, historical records. You know, she was an Arkansas housewife. She didn't know anything about the Middle East or whatever. But once information, like for example, in Jesus in the Essenes, the the um the rabbi that's coming through this person in hypnosis that is living, you know, he's older than Jesus and John, and he's talking about an earthquake in the temple in Qumran. And so she goes off looking for, well, okay, fine, if Sudi, that's the name of this rabbi, if he says there was if he says there was an earthquake and it ruined one of they did a lot of bathing rituals, bathing practices, according to what came through in hypnosis. And so Dolores is like, and Sudi had said that the earthquake had ruined their bathing ceremonial thing. And so she's like, fine, I'll find it in the archaeological record. And sure enough, she did. She found photographs from Qumran of steps going down into a bath, and everything cracked because of an earthquake.
Mm.
And so she was all about validating this stuff. And so it was that I'm not taking this on face value. I'm going to validate this information. That's what spoke to me. And even the way she writes all of her books, all of this stuff is coming out in hypnosis, and every book cover to cover is nothing but hypnosis transcripts. And I think the way she's writing is basically she's saying, I'm not going to tell you what to believe. I'm going
Mm.
to tell you what came out of their mouth. You've got to figure out
I
what you
love that.
believe.
She's a
Hmm.
reporter, right? She's a
Yes.
reporter.
Yes.
Um, and so now you proceeded to train in QHHT. You became a level 3 practitioner, which is no easy feat.
Mhm.
What's the qualifications for level 3?
Yeah. So the certification for level 3, now that Dolores has passed, we're certified by Julia Cannon, her daughter, who's carrying on her mother's work. So we're certified by Julia Cannon to be practicing exactly as Dolores did. So it requires 3 levels of training, which is, you can generally think about it, a week's worth of seminar for each of those levels. And then, so it's basically 150 sessions of practice, which takes years. And then you start your level 3 training, and then you start your level 3 certification, which is every single solitary word, intonation, aspect of your session is scrutinized to make sure that you are practicing exactly as Dolores did.
Hmm.
And Dolores and Julia's point was, or is, a level 3 practitioner is then guaranteed to be practicing exactly as if Dolores were in the room doing the
Wow.
session. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, that's incredible. And just so everyone knows, there's only 30
Yeah.
level 3 practitioners in
In the
the
world.
world. Like
Yeah. In the world.
that's
Yeah.
how rigorous this training
Yeah.
is.
Yeah.
30, right? Like how many
Yeah.
level ones?
Oh, 3,000, 4,000,
So
maybe. Yeah.
there's a huge difference.
Yeah.
So how many you've been doing this for 8 years?
No, by now, in February, it'll be 10 years.
10 years. How many
Mhm.
sessions?
I've got to go back and count, but if you figure about 150 to yeah, about 150 a year. So it's about 1,500 sessions.
Have you
Yeah.
ever been able to like validate information and get lost information like Dolores?
Well, so of late, the last couple of years, I've been working with this client. She became spontaneously able to channel this council, the Council of 12, through her QHHT session. It was a bizarre session and a bizarre that rarely happens. And so we've been doing a bunch of research from in contact with the Council of 12. And it's really not so much ancient research. I'm really not that big of a history buff,
Uh-oh.
but it's future research and what's happening and what's going to happen on the face of the earth as a part of the shift and ascension that the earth herself is going through right now, that Dolores wrote about in Three Waves of Volunteers in the New Earth.
Well, how far out is this future or research?
Um, well, I mean, time to multidimensional beings is a little different than time to humans, but my guesstimate is 20 to 30 to 40 years in the future.
Okay. All right. So it might be a little tough to validate.
Well, we're getting stuff now. I mean, it's up to that far from now forward. And one of the things that the council keeps talking about, which we're seeing, for example, we had a conversation with them about the crashing educational systems before COVID happened.
Oh, wow.
And then COVID happened and the educational systems crashed. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's incredible. Do you have that like on tape? Like
Mhm. It's on YouTube. So
YouTube?
there's a whole channel on YouTube called The Expansion Project, and that's where Laura Di Piazza, she's the channeler. That's where we put all of the information coming from the council for everybody to
It's
witness.
awesome.
Yeah.
So you talk a lot about the higher self, and that's where a lot of the work is healing is done, right? From the higher self for
Mhm.
the client.
Mhm.
QHHT practitioners don't do any of the healing. It's all through the client, and it's in the client, and we heal ourselves. The higher self, though. But can you explain to my listeners what that is, right?
Sure.
Um, what is the higher self, and how does it work through us?
Yeah. Goes by a lot of names. Dolores herself actually called it the subconscious. We now call it the superconscious, consciousness, true self, soul, all of these. But a lot of my clients want to ask so this part of you that isn't associated with your human body, okay? So this eternal part of you is speaking to you through you, or is actually speaking to me, the practitioner, through you during a QHHT session. So your conscious mind is in deep hypnosis, and then this other aspect of you, the eternal aspect of you, is speaking using your mouth, and I'm having a conversation with it. And a lot of my clients they want to put on their list of questions, who are you? Who's talking? Right? I'm like, that's a great question. Absolutely, I'll ask that. And we get answers like, I'm the eternal part of her. I've always been with her. I will always be with her. I'm the part of her connected to source. I know everything about her. I know about all of her other incarnations. I know her purpose. And so they're kind of this all knowing and eternal aspect of ourselves. So, whatever name you want to call that, they don't care what you call them. I call it higher self. Some people would probably call it the soul. Um, and
Have you ever read Robert Monroe, Journeys Out of Body, or any of his
mm-mm,
trilogy?
mm-mm,
I just wonder if it's anything similar to that, where he talks about the I there, right? Like, so
mm,
where all of his incarnations, it's kind of like they're all connected. And he talks about going back to the I there through like a tunnel or something. It's kind of like I guess if I had to explain it a little bit more, visually, it'd be like an octopus, like tentacles down.
Mhm.
Um, and all these incarnations would be separate lives. And then
Yeah.
obviously the main part of the body
Yeah.
would be that I there, that source, the higher self.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, and that's what we find is, yes, sounds the same. I'm really not a fan of past life because it's not past. They're all happening now. Time is an illusion. And so a lot of clients come in and they want to know, they've been told by someone else, like maybe they went and saw a past life regressionist or a psychic or somebody, and they were told from somebody else, oh, I was told I had a past life in la la la, whatever, medieval Germany or whatever. And I'm just like, okay, all right, well, we'll find out. And but the higher self always says, that life isn't past. It's happening now.
but that
And
throws people off because we experience this in such a linear fashion, right? Like,
right, right,
um, can you like
right.
just think about
None
that?
none of your past lives are past.
It's all
They're
happening
happening
right
now.
now.
Yeah,
So when you
exactly.
connect with that life,
Mhm.
are you experiencing it in real time through
Yes.
their eyes?
Yes, and that's how we're healing in QHHT. If the energy associated with a physical manifestation is from another life. So I just had a client just last week. She had like some sort of throat issue, like her vocal cords were malformed, I think, in some way when she was born, or at least that's what she'd been told. And it turned out, excuse me, my vocal cords are wigging out. That's funny.
What a coincidence.
Symptomatic. I often get the symptoms of my clients,
Do
but
you really?
I do. But anyway, we find out in deep, deep, deep trance. We go visit that other life, and sure enough, she had been strangled by a husband or a lover or somebody. She was a woman in that life, and that was the vocal cord thing. It didn't have anything to do with this life. But because both lives are happening now, energetically, that energy is intertwined at the
Hmm.
soul level, right? And so we could simply heal. Of course, the first thing we ask the higher self is it appropriate for her to have vocal cord issues in this incarnation? Maybe it's appropriate. We don't just jump into healing. Maybe she's supposed to have this vocal cord issue in this incarnation. Higher self said, no, it's a carryover from this other life. What else does she need to know about the other life? And she had additional information to unpack about that other life. Some of those players were players in this life, and she needed to know that. So we unpacked that. I said, okay, well, now that she knows all of that, can we repair and restore the vocal cords for this body to the perfect human template? Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah, we can do that. I said, okay, thanks. So they go about their healing. And what they're really doing at that point in time is they're healing the energy of that injury across time. Now, that doesn't mean that that woman that got strangled in the other life was not strangled. She still had that experience. But what that meant is that the karmic energy that arose from that situation was healed for all time
Hmm.
in her QHHT session. So we literally heal across time.
It's interesting because like they talk in Dolores's book, was it Five Lives Lived? They talk
Mhm,
about the resting place, right? Like
mhm, mhm,
the one life that she lived from Germany, she had to go to this resting place for like 200 years just to
mhm,
forget about that personality,
mhm,
and then
mhm,
went into a different life.
mhm.
So, I mean, how does that really work? Like, what is
Yeah,
reincarnation if
yeah,
it's all happening now?
right. So even the resting place is happening in the now, right? So one of the things, I think I mentioned this in the book, I can't remember, but one of the things that and there are a couple of points to make here about time. I love to explore this concept of time with the higher self. So, one of the things that you have to kind of wrap your head around, when I was younger, I would ask everybody, what is eternity? Right. And everybody would say, oh, it's a really, 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 really long time, or it's an infinite amount of time. Yeah, no, that's not true. It's outside of time. Eternity is a place outside of time. Okay. Our souls are eternal because they don't even experience time. Time is a lower dimensional experience. And so when you're in the resting place, there really isn't such a thing as 200 years. I mean, you can try to conceptualize that for a human being. They do try to dumb things down or have to dumb things down for us as humans. But outside of the three-dimensional experience, there is no such thing as time. It's timeless. And the other thing that I found, and I know I shared this in the book, is this freaky time thing with Miriam and Beatrice. I don't know if you remember that,
Mm-mm.
but um, so when someone says that they can predict something to happen globally, like, I don't know, there's going to be a mass panic attack, across the world on March 24th, right? Well, whoever's saying that doesn't really understand time. So, one of the stories I share in the book is about that helps to kind of help us begin to really understand time and how much of an illusion it is my client Miriam, and she came in with this question. She had had this experience and she wanted to unravel it and with the higher self in her QHHT session. So her and her daughter were at Legoland, and her daughter was, I think, 10 or 12 at the time. I can't remember. And she gets a phone call from this other woman. And the other woman is like, "Hey, we met each other at Cornerstone Church on Sunday, and you gave me your phone number, and our girls played together, and you said let's set up a play date for them." And my client, Miriam, is like, "I don't know who you are. I haven't been to Cornerstone Church in 6 years. You've got me confused with someone else." And the other woman's like, No, I'm talking to you on your phone. We talked on Sunday." And so this argument ensues, and the two women are yelling at each other, right, over the phone. One woman thinking that the other was just trying to get out of a play date. And then the other woman thinking, well, this woman has me confused with someone else. And so Miriam turns around, takes a selfie of her and her daughter and texts it to this other woman and says, "Look, you've got me confused with someone else." And the other woman goes, "Nope, that's you. And your older daughter looks a lot like your younger daughter." And my client, Miriam, she goes, "I only have one daughter." And so that was her question in her QHHT session. What was up with that? What
Mm-hmm.
was that? Right. So we find out from the higher self that Miriam had energetically moved her and her daughter 6 years into the future. The daughter was actually in some danger, a dangerous situation with other older people in her life, and the mother energetically, completely subconsciously, energetically moved her and her daughter 6 years into the future. Now, she didn't have 6 missing years, but her 6 years happened at a different trajectory than the other woman. So what was 3 days to Beatrice was 6 years to Miriam.
Oh, wow.
Their relative scale of time was completely different. And the higher self said, ideally, Beatrice would have lost the phone number and forgotten about the incident, but she didn't. And then, therefore, then the cross time situation happened. So what appears to be a certain amount of time for one person is relative, Einstein, right, to
Mhm.
everybody else's timeline. And you cannot say, then therefore predict that something's going to happen to someone on a certain day because you don't know what their time trajectory is going to be.
Wow.
Time is an illusion.
If anyone listening to this has skipped time, please email me and let me know. The higher self, right? Is it different for everyone, or is it the same voice? And
No,
is it God, or is it separate from that?
it is not God. No, it's much lower than God. Um, and so it's directly connected to you. Um, And what was the other part of the question? Oh, is the voice the same?
Well, is it
This is
different, right? Is
yeah,
everyone's higher self like
yeah.
you in your book, Purpose, right? The questions you did research, qualitative research on this. So that means you have to go in and decipher through all the messages and see what most commonly comes up, right?
Yeah.
Um,
It was 700 pages of text.
700 pages of text.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming all these people, like they all can't be the same, right? They're all different messages.
No. And here's the fun part. So the higher self does come through with different personalities for different people. Now I do say the higher self just to get my head around, I guess, that we're all one. You know, at some point in time, yes, we do all coalesce at source, even though we have been separated and separated and separated hierarchically at at a out of body, you know, at a formless in a formless state. But we're all connected at that formless state. But what is funny is that often the higher self will come through the client in a personality that's very different than the human being. Now, in a QHHT session, I spend a couple of hours with the client before the hypnosis, making sure that I understand their questions and the context around the questions. So I kind of pick up on their personality, right? And then I get into the hypnosis and I'm talking to the higher self. So, for example, you know, buttoned up accounting dude, and is, you know, just really, you know, very logical, and you know, has his questions, one dot la la la, two dot la la la, right? And then I'll get to talking to the higher self and it's cracking jokes and it's hilarious, or it's cussing, or it's, you know, it's just like a completely different personality. Or I'll get the, you know, the airy fairy woman, you know, the woo woo woman with all the crystals and the, you know, and 7 rings on each finger and blah blah blah, you know, the stereotype. And then we'll get into the hypnosis, and the higher self is this booming voice, you know, like some military general or something. It's hilarious how different the personality is person to person.
Well, how do our lives now affect the higher self?
Yeah. Yeah, great question. So, like, we come in with a purpose, we come in with a life purpose, we come in with a life lesson. In most cases, we've even chosen the people around us. Like, there was some sort of soul family or soul group that decided to incarnate together for some purpose, collective purpose, collaborative purpose. And so our aspiration should be then to fulfill that purpose. And we're usually drawn to things that are going to help us fulfill that purpose anyway, even if we don't know it from a QHHT session. Um, but the cool thing is it's symbiotic. So think about it. The higher self isn't the part of you that incarnates. The higher self is the part of you that stays etheric, and they get to experience then form life through you. So when we're being very intentional about, you know, eating something delicious or dipping our toes into the creek, or, you know, doing something really really pleasant, and we're intentional about connecting with them in that moment, they then get to experience that emotion, that joy, that you know, whatever laughter or fun or whatever that we're experiencing.
I've always wondered, right? Dolores, and you've often said that we create our own realities, that we're doing this to ourselves, right? Like everything
Mhm.
that we've experienced, all of our experiences, good or bad, have been created by ourself. Now, is that the higher self creating events and situations and simulations, or is it kind of like random events that were set up by the higher self? Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, okay, so it's a dance. I like to use that term, between the plan, the purpose, and free will.
Hmm.
So this particular dimension, three-dimensional Earth, is a dimension where we get to experience free will. And so which the corollaries to that are separation and forgetting. Okay, so we come into this human body forgetting what we really are, and feeling separated from source. And it's actually a treat to get to experience this. Dolores found it. I've corroborated it, that there are more people waiting for a human body, more souls waiting for a human body to incarnate, to have that experience of separation and forgetting and free will, than there are bodies to fill it. So, so you always have this dance between free will and the intended purpose, and so I'll give you an example. It's kind of a sad story. I think I shared it in the book, but elderly client, she actually was in my office for, she had advanced brain cancer. We were trying to physically heal it. It didn't. She passed within a week of her QHHT session. So she's elderly. She's lived her entire life, and now she has this, you know, what's going to check her out completely. And so, how wonderful then to have a QHHT session before that moment to unravel a lot of things that had happened to her. Well, she had suffered abuse her entire life. I mean, from primarily from her father, but from husbands, from other people, even from, from her kids. But going back to her father, she had suffered terrible, terrible abuse. I mean, just let your mind roam. And yes, that's the kind of abuse she suffered. And we find out in her QHHT session, her life lesson is forgiveness. Mm.
Wow.
And her father is actually like a senior elder soul family member
Hmm.
that agreed to come into this incarnation to be this horrible abuser, to play this role so that she could learn forgiveness. And here she is in her 70s, never having forgiven.
Mm.
So she had this entire life, and of course she had to keep trying to learn it. Like every relationship she would have was abusive in some way, shape, or form. It's like, what is going on here? It's like they keep trying to set you up with these lessons of forgiveness. Wait, here's another lesson of potential forgiveness. No, here's another, you're in your 50s. Here's yet another lesson of forgiveness. Never got it. Never. She had the coldest, stoniest heart you could possibly imagine, never experienced forgiveness. So, and then what we find is usually for people that have had this in another life, this situation where they had a life lesson and they didn't get it. There's no judgment. There's not like eternal damnation or anything like that. But you go back with your counsel, and your formless being as your higher self, and you go, yeah, that didn't work. How do you want to do it next time? You know?
Do clients who pass ever come back into a different session and kind of, validate your research?
I have not had that. However, a couple of fun stories. Um, a level 3 colleague of mine, Yaron DeWitt, he's in Los Angeles, years and years and years ago. He had this woman come in as a client whose little boy, he was 6 at the time, the little boy kept saying he was Lou Gehrig, kept saying he used to play
Wow.
baseball. And so the mom came in for a session to kind of corroborate this. What's going? Why is my kid resonating with Lou Gehrig? Like, what? That's a weird thing, right?
Sure.
And sure enough, he was the reincarnation of Lou Gehrig, and this little kid knew family facts that only the family knew, and he was able to meet the family and prove that he was the reincarnation of Lou Gehrig. And the mom ended up writing a book about it, and just really,
Really?
really cool thing. Yeah. And then another really cool reincarnation. I had this client who had this experience and he wanted to explore it. He and his wife, this was years prior to his QHHT session, his wife was pregnant at the time. And they had a tiny little house, little 2-bedroom house. And in the other bedroom was an older friend, not necessarily related, but just someone that they loved, a friend, and he was dying. And they took him in and they were caretaking him, knowing it was the end of his life. And they were just doing this wonderful, charitable thing for this friend to be with him at the end of his life. And so my friend, him and his wife are laying in bed. They don't have any clothes on, and his wife's pregnant. And they're just laying there chatting or whatever. The dying friend is in the next room. And all of a sudden he sees this white light come out of the wall and into his wife's belly. He's like, "What the heck? Did you see that?" And she's like, "Yeah, I saw that. What was that?" Like, I don't know, maybe a car passing, some reflections off, whatever, passed it off. And so he wanted to explore that in his QHHT session. And sure enough, well, then he got up, he made some coffee, he goes into his friend's room, and the friend's dead.
Mm.
The friend died while they were, at that moment. And so he wanted to explore that in his QHHT session. And yeah, sure enough, his son was the reincarnation of his friend.
Wow.
And there was no space in between. Like the man died, and in the next breath, the soul entered the the fetus. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, again, right? There's a mind bender because it goes back to the time thing, right?
Mm,
Like all
yeah.
lives are now. And then you
Yeah.
see a little white light
Yeah.
go through a wall and then
Yeah.
bam into another I got,
Mhm.
it's crazy. I can listen to your stories all night. Have you ever been like Dolores talks about the temple of wisdom, right? Like,
Mhm, mhm,
have
mhm.
you
Yeah.
ever like stumbled upon like, I don't know, maybe like the temple of wisdom while your
Yeah.
clients, like five clients that are maybe spread out, months down the road, have you
Yeah.
experienced like commonalities and like
Absolutely.
locations?
Absolutely. 3 different ways. So, and I have a YouTube of one of these on my YouTube channel. So it's just Holly Duckworth PhD, and I think it's called the library. So I share some of my session segments, actual recordings from actual QHHT sessions, obviously with my client's permission, on my YouTube channel, and this one's on there. And the client went back to the library. So the library is one of these places where it's just you go in and it's like some sort of like Harry Potter kind of thing where there's 7 million books, and you can fly around and open any of them. And then what's inside of these books are lives, right? Records of lives. So the library. And the other one is the tapestry. So
Mm,
I've had clients go to see the tapestry. Dolores wrote about the tapestry, but inside the library is a special room where it's the tapestry and all of these threads, in multiple directions, and they're all different colors. And usually people describe them as they're like moving, like they're waving, like this tapestry is like undulating and pulsating. And if you look all the way down to a single thread represents a life.
mm,
And all the lives are like, woven together in this tapestry. And then the third way that are common for people to experience this, I call it reality. um, to me, that's realer than this, is the Akashic records.
mm.
And I actually went there once in one of my when I was being hypnotized, and it is literally filing cabinets like what you would think, like giant drawers that come out, and you can search through the drawers, just like records, and each one of the records is a life. Now, is there really a library? Is there really a tapestry? Is there really filing cabinets? I think those are ways of our human brain to try to make some sort of sense of this information, and it's all the same information.
Mhm.
I think that those methods of demonstrating the information is symbolic. The library symbolic, the tapestry symbolic, the filing cabinet symbolic, but it's actually grander than that. And our human brains literally cannot conceive of it without putting some sort of symbology around it.
Yeah. Well, it's odd that some people that I don't know, maybe they have read Dolores's work or read your work, but the tapestry room, right? Like that's something that would be unique if 5 people, 6 people, 10 people all talked about it in a
Yeah.
QHHT session over like
Yeah.
a year and none of these
Yeah.
people knew each other.
Yeah.
So like
Yeah.
objectively, if you look at it, how can all these people that don't know each other that are
Yeah.
having these hypnosis
Yeah.
sessions talk about a place, the
Yeah.
tapestry, that all are very common in their description, right?
Yeah.
Like,
So I think it gets a little complex. I studied Jungian psychology. That was my thing before QHHT. And of course, Carl Jung has this concept of archetypes, right? And so I teach a course called Higher Self Integration, and we do some light hypnosis in it. And in one of those light hypnosis sequences, which actually is a Dolores script, we go meet a spirit guide. Okay. And then the spirit guide has a message, and we learn some things through the hypnosis through the spirit guide. I don't know, Trey, probably 30% or more of my clients, when they go meet the spirit guide, they're describing this Merlin character. I mean, it's the stereotype, right? The long white beard, the pointy blue hat, the robe, carrying a staff. It's the same thing over and over and over again. Now, Jung would say that's an archetype. This Merlin character is an archetype in our psyche, that in the collective unconscious, there's this Merlin archetype that all of us can grab onto in our psyche to help us understand. And of course, the Merlin archetype means, wisdom and wizard, magical wisdom.
mhm.
And so I don't put too much, I mean, probably because of my Jungian training, but I don't put too much emphasis on, well, is there really a real three-dimensional library? I really think that it's a symbol for the um, multidimensional information that's accessible in the ethers.
Mm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
totally agree with you. It's just interesting how the tapestry room and places like this keep coming up,
Yeah.
in people's experiences of hypnosis. It's just kind of like, that's just so interesting to me,
Mhm,
how it's a commonality or something. Maybe not to a T, but like similar, right?
mhm, mhm.
Um, what is your purpose here in life?
My purpose is to be love and bring love. And I do that by helping other people spiritually awaken.
What does it feel like when you get done with a session? Like after you get done talking to the
Mm.
higher self, maybe like an
Uh,
instantaneous healing session, like
yeah,
physically, like
yeah,
curing. I don't know. Have you cured
yeah,
cancer
yeah.
or anything like that?
Cancer, yeah, yeah, absolutely. All sorts of cancer, stage 4 cancer. I've even been flown to clients that have stage 5, but don't wait until then, it's too late. Um, Autoimmune diseases, name one: diabetes, fibromyalgia, rheumatoid arthritis, cured. Teeth regrown. That's kind of a freaky one. No,
Instantaneously?
no, no, no. It took a little while. It took a few weeks, but literally a missing tooth in an adult, regrown. Um, Metal dissolved in bones. Yeah. I
So
mean,
you're bought in. You know this stuff
oh yeah,
works.
oh yeah, 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 yeah. Um, So after a session, actually, I used to it energetically. It's more impactful than just the wow factor. I mean, after doing this for 10 years, it's like, well, of course we're going to cure the cancer. It's not a big deal. Um, but I used to start my sessions at 1 p.m. and I couldn't go to sleep by midnight because I was
Wow.
just like, "Nee." And so now I have to start them at 10 a.m. so that by
So you're going to bed at 10
so
p.m.
so by the time I go to bed, I can actually not be vibrating the way I would have been vibrating.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah,
I'm so fascinated with this work. I want to do this work. I think it's so important.
go for it.
Um, yeah, for sure. I mean, we talked about that now, right? Like,
Yeah.
but how often are you like, I mean, we talked about, you are also in psychotherapy too, talk therapy.
Mhm, mhm.
Do you ever get bummed when you have to do like talk therapy? You're like, this is if I if I could just shake them and say, come over to the QHHT side and just experience
Yeah.
this one time. Come
Yeah.
over here. We can cure you. Come on.
Yeah. There you would be surprised at the number of people that are still afraid, afraid of QHHT, afraid of um, hypnosis that especially sorry,
You're good.
especially at the level that the level of trance that we get in QHHT. And there are some people that don't want to have their higher self tell them what they need to know. I find that my psychotherapy, I do existential therapy, and then, like I said, I do this course called Higher Self Integration, which is just becoming aware of higher self in your day to day life. And those opportunities, which are just brief, 1 hour here, an hour there, maybe a 3 hour course kind of thing. Um, they're they're just way because trust has to develop. You can't even imagine in a QHHT session. I mean, the person in trance is in such a vulnerable state that not only does trust have to be developed, but I have to be trustworthy, right? And that means not just physically, not just mentally, not just intellectually, but energetically, spiritually as well. I have to do my homework to be
Mhm.
trustworthy. And so the other avenues become like more comfortable on ramps to the real deal, which is QHHT.
Real deal.
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. Holly, I have to have you on again sometime down the road. There's so many questions that I did not get to ask you.
I'd love that, Trey. I'd love that.
How can people connect with you? How can they find you?
Yeah.
What's your YouTube? What's your website?
Yeah. So my YouTube is Holly Duckworth PhD, and you'll see my shiny face right there and lots of stuff about QHHT. Lots of stuff about QHHT. And then my website is awarecaredurango.com. AwareCareDurango.com. Lots of information there about QHHT, higher self integration, existential therapy. You can order my book there. You can order my book on Amazon. It's on Kindle and it's on Audible, all the avenues. And then I'm on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Go check her out, follow her, buy her book. It's worth it every cent. I loved it. Holly, thank you so much for taking the time and joining the show.
Thank you, Trey.